This podcast is supported by Wesleyan Financial Services, providers of specialist financial advice to members of the legal profession. Wesleyan's team of dedicated experts have been helping law firms and their employees achieve financial well-being over many years, providing personal and commercial financial advice, in-firm seminars, and online guidance. Strategic partners with the Law Society, Wesleyan is proud of its partnership with Women in the Law UK. For more information about Wesleyan, visit wesleyan.co.uk, or to arrange a financial education event in your firm or a no-obligation financial health check, connect with Sarah Deacon, Wesleyan Area Manager, on LinkedIn.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Talking Law from Women in the Law UK. I'm Sally Penni MBE, a barrister at Kenworthy's Chambers in Manchester, the joint vice chair of the Association of Women Barristers and the founder of Women in the Law UK. Do come and join in on our group page on LinkedIn. Just search for Women in the Law UK. Or follow me, Sally Penni. Today, you'll hear my conversation with the inspirational Dr Tunde Okewale MBE, a barrister at Doughty Street Chambers, one of the leading human rights chambers in the world and the founder of Urban Lawyers. I started by asking Tunde about his surname and got him to teach me the correct African pronunciation.
Okewale, or if you are not going to use the African accent, you can just say okay, Wally, and I won't take offence.
Okay, Wally. No, I prefer to use the African accent. Tunde, thank you so much, Dr. Tunde Okewale MBE. Thank you for joining me on Talking Law podcast. It's been a while. I've been trying to get you, haven't I, for probably years now. And I'm glad I've knuckled you down on a Friday afternoon. So thank you, Tunde.
No, thank you for, considering me. I've seen the podcast grow and develop. And also, congratulations on receiving your MBE. For all of the other hard work that you do outside of the podcast. It's a good thing and it's very inspirational because there are going to be lots of young women in the profession looking up to you that will be inspired through the work you've done and you receiving the accolade. So congrats.
Oh, thank you so much, Tunde. But of course, you were the pioneer and set the way to be doing great work with Urban Lawyers. And so I want to start from the beginning. So, I didn't get here by myself. I learned from the best, if I can say, even though I'm older than you. Before you say it. But Tunde, you are a barrister at Doughty Street Chambers, or if not, the leading human rights chambers in the world. You've got Helena Kennedy there. You've got Kirsty Brimlow there. You've got all sorts of people, including Amal Clooney, who hasn't been on this podcast yet, but they've got you. And you are also a bencher at Inner Temple, the Honourable Society. You yourself have an MBE, and you founded Urban Lawyers. So I want to start from the beginning, really. And you used to work in Sainsburys, which, the press seemed to go to town about. So why did you come to the law? How did it all start from the beginning? Why law? And because you are an inspirational role model. So how did you decide you wanted to become a barrister?
I tell this joke all the time that, if you're from an African background, you only have 4 career options: lawyer, doctor, accountant, or failure. But the honest reality of it is that it was just something that naturally happened. I just gravitated towards this particular occupation. I was always someone that was asked or elected to be a representative throughout my studies. And it just kind of felt right that I was someone that was going to be the voice for others in contentious disputes. So I just thought it organically happened. There wasn't necessarily a very clear career path. I wasn't very intentional until I became much older. So when I was in my second year at university, that's when I became really focused. Had I been more focused sooner, who knows what I may have been able to accomplish or have done. And that's the reason why I'm very keen to tell young students to become very focused about what it is exactly that they want to do. Because the sooner they can become specific, the sooner they can become successful.
Wow. Well, one of the amazing things is that Urban Lawyers has been going for 10 years. And I just think that is amazing. It's a charity. Maybe you can just share with me, how did it come about that you, as a young barrister, decided to set up a charity which will be encouraging other, and it's not all Black minorities, actually, are they? Because I've spoken at the conferences.
No.
Yeah, the working class white kids, or just, a mix of all sorts of people who come for the advice. So how did you decide to do that? Because that's quite a courageous thing to do.
So just to perhaps provide some very good context for it, at the time when I was creating Urban Lawyers, this was before the word urban was associated with Black and, urban culture. It was literally just supposed to mean inner city, because ultimately what I wanted to do was to provide opportunities for, inner city kids like myself that wanted, a career in law. Ultimately, it does mean that a lot of the kids from the inner city will come from, ethnic minority backgrounds. But the objective of the organization was literally just to help those that were placed at a disadvantage. And the genesis of Urban Lawyers was literally, once I became a barrister, people asking me two questions. The first was, how did someone like you do it? The second question was, I have a friend who, has a problem. Do you know what their rights are? Can you help? So the objective was ultimately to make the law more accessible, not only in its career sense, but also in its educational sense. And that was the framework for the creation of Urban Lawyers. I initially started off going to community centres and schools to provide information about career opportunities, as well as educational workshops, which were around stop and search, police powers. I would then recruit people that had specialisms in different areas. So if someone was a specialist in housing law, they may perhaps run an educational session on landlord and tenants' rights. And that was how Urban Lawyers started and how it was able to expand. So where now we have, a national presence. We're operational in 5 different cities, and we're fortunate enough to have barristers like yourself contribute towards filling up our objectives.
Which is amazing. And it's not just myself, to be frank. There's Alexandra Wilson, Mavis, you've got all sorts of people, but also the big city law firms, Freeths and Herbert Smith. And so it's really a testament to how much it's grown and the support that you have. I wonder, did you ever think, gosh, this might not work out? Did you ever have any kind of the imposter syndrome that, I struggle with, and so many do, that this won't work? Or did you have that belief that I can do this?
So it's quite interesting. From a professional point of view, I probably suffered from a lack of confidence more than I did in relation to Urban Lawyers. With Urban Lawyers, I didn't necessarily have that sense of doubt or uncertainty or even an imposter syndrome. I was very confident that it was a problem that a lot of people wanted to solve, namely widening participation and making access to law a priority. So I wasn't necessarily worried about that, because anytime that I spoke about Urban Lawyers and asked people to assist, the answer was always yes. And that's always been the case in relation to Urban Lawyers. I've never really encountered, barriers from people supporting the organization. The barriers have been different in relation to Urban Lawyers. But certainly in terms of getting into the profession, it was difficult because at the time I was coming through, there were very few barristers that looked like me. There were very few initiatives that supported barristers that, came from my background. So I had the imposter syndrome, in the infancy of my career, in terms of, staying and feeling like this is a place that I belonged. However, that motivated me to then ensure that Urban Lawyers worked, so that when people coming behind me didn't feel the same as I did. So maybe that's the reason why I didn't necessarily feel it in terms of Urban Lawyers, because my passion was to make sure that how I felt, nobody else would feel that way. And that's why, the organisation continues to do what it does. The ultimate objective is for it to become redundant so that it doesn't need to exist anymore.
That's a really positive aim, actually, in an odd sort of way, isn't it? That actually people don't need urban lawyers anymore.
That's the objective. Like, hopefully, the profession becomes so diverse and inclusive that you don't need those initiatives any longer.
Yes. But can I ask you, Tunde, because you've often talked about, in the Times and, in all my research, about how you actually got into law. And it was tough, as you said, and people didn't look like you. But you did a couple of work experiences which were really inspired you, didn't it?
I think every single work experience that I had inspired me. The first ever work experience I had was with a barrister who was my first legal mentor, called Michael Nicholson. And that experience inspired me because I really understood what it was that barristers do, and what it was that I needed to do to become a barrister. So that experience, my first was great. All of the others taught me something different that has subsequently, enabled me to do what I've done, and remain in the profession. But that being said, the non-legal experiences have been equally as important, particularly, working in Sainsburys and in retail, in the sense that I developed, my soft skills that sometimes people overlook, namely communication skills, problem solving, and having the ability to deal with people from all walks of life, especially as a criminal advocate. That's a skill that is something that you can't actually place a monetary value on, and some things that people don't actually ever learn.
Yes. Well, can I ask that, you are actually hugely successful in the courtroom and outside of the courtroom. Do you think that Doughty Street has played a part in that? Because they're very lucky to have you, as I said in the beginning. But do you think that's giving you confidence somehow that you're in this set, which actually is a human rights public law set, and is quite active and proactive? The leader of the opposition party, Keir Starmer, was at your chambers. So I just wonder if some of that kind of has urged you on as well, because I know also you're quite religious, because I follow you on various platforms, and as am I, in the sense that I love the quotes that you put out. So, to what extent has the chambers you're in played a part in your success?
A huge success. I'm fortunate enough to be, with some of the best barristers in the world. I'm able to access their minds and their support when I need to, and also it's given me the confidence that I am good enough. Ultimately, it's the chambers that is well respected, and if you're a member of that chambers, that respect, is also attached to you. So certainly, being there has definitely helped. But I didn't start off there, so getting there,
yes,
was an achievement in itself, because I applied for Doughty Street for pupillage and got rejected. And it was only once, I had done pupillage at a different set of chambers, 4 Breams buildings, obtained tenancy and practiced for about 2 years, that I was able to successfully apply and join Doughty Street. I feel that, being at a good set of chambers, but also a supportive set of chambers, is useful for any practitioner, and it contributes to your success. In terms of, my faith, it's an integral part of my identity. And it's something that, has motivated me and given me the confidence to continue during difficult periods of time. As you know, being a practitioner, there are periods of times where, you don't necessarily feel motivated to carry on doing the job. People are unappreciative. You don't necessarily see money. And you need something to, inspire you, and give you the faith to continue. And for me, that's definitely been my faith, as well as the support of family, friends, and colleagues.
Yes, absolutely. So can I ask you, just at this junction, Tunde, is there a memorable case that's really affected your career, or that stays with you? And often I ask this question, and I think Laura Cox, or Dame Laura Cox, she talked about a European case, in the ECJ. I'm not talking about that. And other people, I think Kirsty Brimlow, thinks about the first case she ever did on her feet. And it's amazing. It's not really the cases that are reported in the law reports, for example, um, that stay with us. It's often the cases where we've won monies in the employment tribunal, or for me, somebody's appeal has been allowed. So I wonder if you've got a case that's really memorable and stayed with you, or you felt really made and established you, that you can share.
There are loads of cases, but perhaps the one that suitably answers your question would be the case of Dwayne George. That is the first and only, to this day, student-led criminal appeal that was successful in the Court of Appeal. It was a murder conviction that was quashed and was, initiated and run by the Cardiff Innocent Project. That case is memorable for a number of reasons. The defendant in that case was a young black man who lost 12 years of his life. He was incarcerated. Whilst incarcerated, he obtained a first-class degree in law. So he also contributed to the preparation of his case. And it was just being part of the team that contributed to him getting his life back. He served his time in prison, was on license during the appeal, so got to have conferences and meet him. And even though he was convicted of murder, he still made efforts, to change his life. One of the first things he did when he got out of prison, was to get married, start a family. He's then, started a number of successful businesses. So it was just quite inspiring that someone who had encountered so many adversities didn't allow that to shape his identity. And it felt quite inspiring and humbling to have contributed to his story. He's now conviction free. It was just, it was just an inspiring moment. Also, the fact that, there was university students who had graduated because they had worked on the case for a number of years, who still came back and attended a Court of Appeal. So it was just inspiring in so many ways, in the sense that there was a real commitment to justice from all the parties that were involved, and justice, despite it taking, almost, was it 10 years in his case? He got it in the end. So for me, it'd definitely be that case.
Wow. Well, I can hear in your voice and see it that it's quite emotional for you to talk about how powerful that experience was, really, because I've often hear you quoting and saying really quite meaningful and inspirational quotes, one of which you often say is, "Don't let your past define who you are." Does that come from that case?
That quote doesn't actually come from the case. That quote actually comes from my degree. So I obtained a 2-2 at undergraduate studies. And one of the biggest confidence issues I had, certainly when I was younger in the profession, was my grades and the fact that I didn't go to a good university. And there's, a big hang up that students and professionals attach to their backgrounds, rather than realizing that it can be a sense of power, it can be your unique selling point, and there are lots of things that, your past can contribute to your future. So rather than looking at it in a negative way, I try to encourage people and encourage myself. It's not where you start, it's where you're going. And that's pretty much a reflection of that quote and that philosophy. And it's reaffirmed, through cases like the Dwayne George case, through, the success that Urban Lawyers has with students who have a similar story to my own, where they may not have got the grades, but now they've gone on to become successful practitioners. So it's just a good reminder that, people shouldn't allow, their past failures to define who they are. And in fact, that they should learn from them, because they will contribute to their inevitable success.
Yes. Tunde, I wonder if I can ask you then. I talk often about diversity. In fact, my honour mentions diversity in the workplace, services to diversity, social mobility, and the law. And I often think we are making huge progress in recruitment, not so great with retention in the judiciary, in senior leadership positions in the law, both in solicitors' firms and at the bar like you and I. So there are improvements, but still work to be done. And I wonder, what do you think? And, can you think of ways that we can actually improve in those areas? Because when I interviewed Joanna Hardy, who is, a blonde white woman, and we sit on, as you do, the CBA Social Mobility Committee, and we speak in schools, and, we tweet and so on. People think that the issue of diversity is being dealt with. It's all over. And the attrition of women at the bar, it's all over. What do you think about diversity?
It depends on what your definition of diversity is. And what you also have to remember is that everyone's paradigm is different. So if you're looking at it from a point of view that is the bar got better female representation, then the answer is yes. There's certainly been, improvements. It still can be better. Certainly in relation to Black senior positions, there's been very little progress. So I think that the issue of diversity can be quite tricky, because diversity often means that we compound different experiences and we lose the nuances that certain groups face and the barriers that they encounter. Certainly, what we need to have is a more focused approach to the specific groups that are not adequately represented, and ensure that there are initiatives in place to remedy that. Certainly, there cannot be an argument that there hasn't been any progress, but certainly more work still needs to be done.
Yes, absolutely. I want to ask you a few things about your kind of personal life, if you like. Don't worry, I'm not going to say, are you married or anything like that. But I get asked an awful lot, how do you fit in? I've got 3 children and a husband, and so on and so forth. And yet we are giving our time and our space to inspire others and support others. And men don't get asked that question really very often. In fact, famously, Sally Lindsay, who's an actress, has a brother who's a very famous brother. He's a drummer. He's never been asked that question, and yet she's asked all the time because she has twins. So I'm just going to ask you about well-being, because we know, don't we, the bar is long hours, midnight oil, big prep, volumes of work, if we're lucky, and of course we are going through COVID. So how and what do you do for your well-being?
Very good question. So certainly in terms of physically, I go to the gym. So I exercise, I keep active. Mentally, I take my mind off the job where I can. So I engage in activities that mean that I can genuinely relax. That may mean reading a book, listening to music, going to events. This was pre-COVID, of course. Yes. All of the major events now are online. But I really focus on, feeling good. So I tend to do things that make me feel good. A lot of people, when they speak about well-being, don't necessarily address the main objective of it, and it's all about how you feel. So I tend to do things that don't detrimentally impact my body or mind, but enable me to feel good, feel refreshed and motivated. And sometimes that might just be relaxing and doing nothing. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be a 5-mile run. It might just mean, spending time with family and friends, having a good meal, turning your phone off. It just genuinely means, resetting back to factory default and being relaxed.
Yeah, I've made a note of those there. Tunde, can I ask you about, you mentioned reading, whether you've got a favourite book and why, and secondly, I don't know if you watch legal dramas. I only watch them if my mum phones up to say, watch this, Sal, you might get some tips. If you did watch or read fictional dramas, who's your favourite fictional lawyer? And the earlier question was, what's your favourite book and why?
I've got so many books, so I'll list few of them.
3, yes.
All right, so one would be The Alchemist.
Yes,
an amazing book about self-discovery. It's a book that, I was reading during my, bar vocational course, as it was called at the time. And I felt that, it helped me a lot and encouraged me. So I like that book a lot. A second book would be The Greatness Guide by Robin Sharma. Again, another feel-good self-help book, but it's really practical in the sense that it gives you, very clear, practical guides to, staying motivated and applying discipline in your life. I found that very good certainly in the beginning of my career, where you're trying to establish a routine, trying to remain disciplined, trying not to be discouraged, and not to be over anxious and hypersensitive to all of the new experiences that you're encountering. And then the final book would be The Great Jamaican Advocates. So there's a book I stumbled across, right, from Wildy's bookstore. When I first started out, I used to make it a habit that every month I bought a book on advocacy. So I've got all of the books, ranging from Devil's Advocate,
wow,
the Golden Rules of Advocacy. But I stumbled across this book by Ralph Codlin, and it's a really good book about great Jamaican advocates. And it gives you some information about these advocates, memorable cases that they've been involved in, and some useful tips to be a great advocate. And I just found the book really amazing. Randomly, the copy that I purchased was a signed copy.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know if Wildy's knew that, but yeah, I got the signed copy. I'm looking at it now, actually, as I speak to you. I just took it from the shelf in my library. Great book.
Wow. Well, they do now. Gosh, I need to get some. I need to get that. Just on the advocacy, if you got kind of 3 quick tips, sort of 3 simple tips on how to be a good advocate for some of my younger listeners.
3 tips that people... All right, so the first tip would be preparation, which people always refer to. I feel that a lot of confidence or lack of confidence is directly related to how prepared you are. The more prepared you are, the more confident you feel, and you're less overwhelmed by the general experience of being in court. The second piece of advice is structure. Sometimes you have the answers, you know what you're going to say, but you can be thwarted if you don't have a good structure. So structure is very important, certainly to me anyway. And brevity. Be concise. I often feel that the use of too many words can often dilute the meaning of what's trying to be communicated. So those would be my 3 tips.
Fantastic. And see, that caught you on the hoof there, didn't I? And so who's your favourite fictional lawyer and why?
So it's interesting, right? I watched, well, I'm not sure if I call them legal dramas, but legal shows. And there are a number of fictional characters that I like. The one that, springs to mind would be Harvey Specter from Suits, just because he's very cool, wears nice suits, very successful, driven. However, I want to, add another one in that I really like. And this is a barrister called Cleaver Green. So there's a show called Rake, which is on Netflix. Yes. And it's actually about the Australian bar.
Oh, yes. Is this a chap who's a bit flawed? He's always got quite complicated life.
He's a flawed character that no matter what happens, his personal life is a complete shambles. But bizarrely, when he gets into court, he is a success. So nothing fits into place in terms of his personal life, but it all comes together in the courtroom, to the extent that, he eventually becomes disbarred and then he pursues a career in politics. It's just good television. And also, from an advocacy point of view, quite useful in terms of strategy and tips. I found it to be quite realistic from a courtroom point of view. From his personal life point of view, dramatic for obvious reasons. It's television. Yeah. But certainly from what happens in court and trial strategy, it was quite clever.
Yes. I think my husband likes a lot of legal dramas and he used to watch it. So I need to watch more of it. Yeah.
Good show.
Well, Tunde, just talking about shows and maybe television and dramas, you ended up meeting the American actor, Michael J. Fox, and various other actors and directors, one of whom was the director who also played the evil Panther, if we can call him that, in Black Panther. Now, how did it come about that you ended up being at the premiere of a Miscarriages of Justice American movie and meeting Michael J. Fox? No, Jamie Foxx.
Well, so it was Jamie Foxx, Michael B. Jordan.
That's right.
Yeah, and the author of the book, Just Mercy, Brian Stevenson. And I wasn't invited to the premiere. I, in fact, hosted my own premiere. So what happened? I was allowed to watch the film, I think maybe about nearly 8 months prior to its official launch. So when they were, finalizing production of it, and they were looking for someone who, was similar to Brian Stevens to some extent, someone that had a track record for doing work with miscarriages of justice, someone that, was very community orientated. And they reached out to me. So they asked me, they said, would I be interested in assisting with, promoting the film, as well as the work that Brian Stevenson does with his organization in America. Obviously, I was willing to do it, but I played it cool and said, I'll think about it. Let me watch. I asked to watch the film first. So I watched the film about 3 times before it actually came out. And then when at the premiere that I hosted, I didn't actually watch it again because I'd seen it so many times. And what happened was that they were very keen to have the legal community watch the film and be involved in a dialogue about miscarriages of justice, cross-jurisdictional. So not only did I host a premiere, I hosted a Q&A session with the cast and Brian Stevenson with a room full of practitioners. So I invited a group of lawyers, community activists and grassroots individuals that work within the miscarriages of justice arena to have that dialogue and exchange. And that was the primary objective. Wow. I then also hosted a number of smaller screening sessions for youth groups. There was an opportunity for young kids, again, who may not have been able to, pay to go to the cinema to watch the film and see the importance, of law, knowing your legal rights, and to, be encouraged that justice can be attained and achieved.
Yes, it's such a powerful film, and of course based on a true story, true life
of Walter Macmillan.
Yeah. Really, really is. God, I feel quite emotional talking about that now. Tunde, you're the youngest master of the bench at Inner Temple, not my inn, Graves, which is quite an achievement, isn't it?
It's the best inn, to be fair, but hey,
well,
it's not, you're allowed to join more than one inn.
No, I didn't know that.
So yeah, you are. You're allowed to join more than one inn. So you're more than welcome. If you want to come over to Inner Temple, the greatest inn that there is. All of the inns are good, but obviously, I have an inherent bias towards the best inn. So
well, I think it's debatable. All I can say is, Gray's Inn have got a competition, haven't they, on their hands? So watch this space. But I'm so pleased for you because most masters of the bench, let's face it, are in silk. They're QCs. They are grey, and they're nearing the some. But certainly when we came to the bar, they tended to be people who were on the bench and nearing perhaps closer to their end of their careers than being mid-successful. So how was it that you accepted that, and what does it involve?
So it involves, being involved in terms of the governance of the inn. So essentially, I'm one of the, key people that deals with how the inn is run. And that ranges from, the development and training for practitioners, students coming in, the finances and the organizing of the inn. So it's akin to being a company director.
Yeah.
For those non-legal listeners that wanted to have an understanding of it. I'm also able to, call people to the bar now. So I have the honor of being able to, sign off and call people to the bar. So it's quite, a privilege and an honor that I was selected. And I think it's a reflection that the bar is, progressing. Certainly when I was coming up, there were very few benchers of color, very few female benchers. In fact, there was a night called, Ladies' Night, which was the night where when you became a bencher, you could bring your significant other along. It's now called Benchers' Night. So again, it's a reflection that, times are changing. The bar is developing and adapting to the times. And, it feels great that certainly, my appointment is a reflection of that. But there have been subsequent others. So there have been others that have been appointed as benchers in all different inns. And, again, it's just showing that the profession is trying to change, become more diverse and inclusive.
Yes. And starting early and not waiting till people have completed their careers to be able to contribute their skills. You've got a great deal at a younger age. Well, Tunde, you've got an honorary doctorate from Manchester University. I've already said you are a master of the bench, which is an important governing role. You set up a charity. Your practice is hugely successful. I wonder, and what's next? Because you've also contributed to books and articles, and certainly mentored the likes of Alexandra Wilson, who mentions you in her book, In Black and White. And Lord Reed is very keen to have a Black or ethnic minority person in the Supreme Court. Lord Reed is the current president of the Supreme Court, and he replaced Lady Hale. So he's very keen to see that before he retires, which is in 6 years' time. And I wonder if, have you thought about what's next and whether that might be on the horizon? Maybe not the Supreme Court, why not? But certainly the bench.
So in terms of, what's next, I've co-founded an organization called One Case at a Time.
Yes, I believe that.
With, 3 others, including Alexandra. And certainly my priority is just focusing on making that organization a success, and hopefully it being in existence for a decade in the same way Urban Lawyers has been. So certainly that's my focus now. In terms of, what the future holds for me, I tend to, keep my cards close to my chest, and I won't share that. The only thing that I will say is that, I'm very keen to develop what I've already, contributed to the profession, and assume, positions that allow me to, improve and make the work that's already been done more effective. A very vague answer, but yeah.
Yes. Well,
that's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Well, we'll watch. We'll watch that space. But just on that fund, why did you set that up? And was it instigated by the death of George Floyd and the protests that were reignited by the Black Lives Matter movement? And what do you aim to achieve with it? Because again, you've got some brilliant support there. The fund is aiming to, fund underrepresented groups. Have I got that wrong? Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Okay, so the origin of One Case at a Time, as you pointed out, was based on, the death of George Floyd. Certainly the view that was adopted by myself and the other co-founders was that the legal community needed to contribute towards, this narrative of, racial injustice. So what we decided to do is, use our skill set, use our networks and resources to combat that. So the objective of the organization is to combat and challenge anti-Black racism. And how that's done is by offering pro bono assistance, funding for ancillary matters linked to litigation, funding of strategic litigation, and research that can influence and call about for reform and policy changes. We've been fortunate enough to have the support of Clifford Chance, JP Morgan, and the Bank of America already. So the organization, in that regard, is well supported. What we need to do now is just ensure that, from a governance point of view, that we're delivering, fulfilling our objectives, and that we're contributing actively to this dialogue that's surrounding injustice and, challenging any outcomes that are not equitable.
Yes. And do you see the conversations as a continuing, or do you think, because I see the use of the hashtag Black Lives Matter being used less and less, I see less lawyers signing up. During the protests, I think I was one of the people not protesting, but offering legal advice on the call, and certainly those on my circuit and yours. But do you see that we're seeing change as a result of the movement?
I think we need to be very careful. So I think that as a community, the general public is against anti-racism, whether it's anti-Black racism, racism generally. I think that, there hasn't necessarily been a move away from it, but it's not necessarily, front page news anymore. There are other pressing issues, such as COVID, such as the End SARS movement in Nigeria. There are so many other global matters that equally need our attention. So I don't necessarily feel that, there's been a shift away from it. I just genuinely feel that there's been a fragmentation in terms of people's attention. Certain people, may want to now focus on matters that they deem to be more imminent. I do feel that, the dialogue around, anti-racism is one that is going to be ongoing. It's not something that can be addressed or resolved overnight. And it's certainly something that I feel the legal community and people generally are still keen about. I think that whether or not that's expressed by supporting the Black Lives Matter movement, it doesn't really matter, to be fair. There are some people for, their own reasons that may want to contribute in a different way.
Yes.
And that's not bad and that's not wrong. But I do think that we should be very careful about, limiting the way that people can combat racism, anti-Black racism by being linked to the Black Lives Matter movement, when if there are other ways that they feel are more effective, they should do so. Certainly from a concept, the movement is something that is so fluid. It means different things to different people in any event. Also, there's the aspect that, it's also an organization. So I do feel that, the narrative about anti-racism, should be much broader than a hashtag, and a movement. And it's something that, everybody should be, involved in. And I feel to some extent the general public are very concerned about it and they do want to do something. It's just identifying, how they want to do it.
Yes. And building allies, which is something I've often talked about, having men as allies is very important for a women's organization.
Having everyone as allies, like the problems that affect a particular group affect everyone. So, it's all dialogues and problem solving require the input of everyone, even those that are not directly affected. So, yeah, I certainly agree with you.
Well, COVID is a problem for everyone, not just in health. We can see it disproportionately affects our community than others, and judging by the number of deaths. But I'm also worried about its effect on the bar and diversity at the bar and the entrance to the bar. What do you think will be the impact of COVID so far as the legal profession and the bar is concerned, which is our area?
It's so interesting. So there's a big backlog of work, which means that people that are able to, ride out the storm will be in a very fortunate position next year, hopefully, where they'll be inundated with work. However, there are chambers, solicitors firms, and individuals that financially can't wait that long. I've been fortunate enough to, still be doing trials, still going to court, but not everybody's in that same position. And I do feel that particularly the junior bar and junior members of the profession are not able to keep earning, may be forced to leave. It was already difficult before COVID, but COVID has made it even worse. So I do feel that the profession would have shrunk once we see the other side of COVID. And a lot of people may be discouraged from entering, the profession and may want to, pursue a career where there's more certainty.
Yes.
Because as self-employed practitioners, there are a number of, government schemes that, have been put in place for employed professionals that we don't benefit from or we cannot access. I do feel that the future will be difficult, but that shouldn't be, a reason for people not to pursue a career at the bar. I think that, with all problems, there's an opportunity to find solutions. There's an opportunity to create new opportunities. So with the advancement of technology, I definitely envisage that there'll be new creative ways, to offer legal services. So I would say, to those out there that are very worried about the future, to be creative, and rather than think doom and gloom, think about how they can use this opportunity to still deliver, professional services. Certainly, from my point of view, I'd encourage those that are in the profession already to become direct access qualified if they haven't done so already. Certainly, that puts you in a position where you can provide legal services directly to clients. It's beneficial to you in a sense of cash flow because the money's given to you up front. And in many instances, the services that you're providing is advice-based, so you can work remotely. So that is a COVID, solution for the short term. So, and for those that are, considering entering the profession, they need to be thinking about, the use of technology to enhance their CVs. They need to be thinking about opportunities that can be accessed electronically and about things that they can do to contribute towards organizations, remotely. So a lot of organizations, due to COVID, have had to reduce admin. Certainly, there are a number of chambers that I know that have collapsed, that have got rid of most of their admin staff. It's a good opportunity now for those that are working from home, that want to think about work experience, to see whether or not they can assist and contribute towards chambers administratively remotely. They'd have to get through, various GDPR and privacy aspects. But if there is an opportunity to contribute and obtain work experience remotely, do so, because chambers would benefit from it, because, the money isn't there necessarily to pay. And as long as you're not being exploited, there is a good opportunity to, assist, develop your skills and do so remotely.
Yes, absolutely. Well, they are very, very good ideas, particularly for younger ones, because it is something that I've been concerned about. Tunde, I often say the law is a marathon, not a sprint. I wonder, you're quite a few years core. I know you went to university with Amanda Adiola, or bar school with Amanda, Chronicles of a Family Lawyer, a brilliant woman. And I just wonder, what advice would you have for those at the bar and those who are solicitors perhaps entering, about how to stay in the profession, and perhaps, how to stand out even for those who are entering? Because longevity is important, isn't it? The bar, we've had several knocks, whether it's fees, whether it's access to justice, crumbling courts, leaking roofs, all the rest of it. And resilience is a word that's often used, isn't it? But I wonder if you can perhaps assist us with, how to keep on in the marathon.
Since you used the analogy of a marathon, right? If you were preparing for a real life marathon, what you would do is you would identify, and set yourself a specific target as to how long, you'd want to complete the marathon in. You'd have smaller other goals. For example, you'd want to do a various part of it in this time frame, a large amount of preparation that you'd have to do before you even start. That's the same way you need to approach your career. Before you begin, you need to have very clear targets. And the reason why I say that is that if you don't have very clear targets, it becomes very difficult for you to be motivated and persevere during the difficulties in the marathon. If you know, for example, that, you're trying to, run a particular time, when you're feeling a degree of discomfort, you're quite happy about it because it's part and parcel of you obtaining the goal. If you don't have a particular goal, anytime you feel discomfort, it's quite easy for you to say, well, hold on a minute, I'm going to take a break and stop now. And that's the same way that you have to look at the career. I think that before you even start the profession, you should have a 10-year, maybe 20-year plan. The longer your perspective is, the easier it is for you to stay motivated and endure obstacles. And the reason why I say that is that, on any journey, when you know where you're going, if there are roadblocks or issues, you don't say you're going to go home. You look for alternative routes. Whereas if you're not clear about where it is you want to go, one, how do you know when you've actually got there? And two, what's the motivation to keep going if you don't know exactly where it is you're going? So I do feel that, for those that are entering the profession, be very clear about what it is you want to do, because once you're clear about what it is you want to do, it makes it easier for you to identify people that can help you. It makes it easier for you to identify opportunities that you need to develop the skills and for you to, get to where you want to go. So those are the things that I would encourage people to do. If you're already in the profession, it's not too late to set those goals now. Goal setting is something that is a continuous process. It might even be the case that you have goals, and as a result of either achieving them or not achieving them, you set new goals. So I definitely feel goal setting is an integral part of that process of not being discouraged, persevering throughout the marathon and being successful. It's certainly something that I've applied to my own life and a philosophy that I'd encourage others to adopt.
Absolutely. I used to run marathons. That's why I use that analogy. I don't now, but I do for the odd runs. But they were all very, very helpful, and I was jotting them down myself, actually, Tunde. Well, Tunde, we're coming to kind of the end, really, of our interview and our conversation. I asked you earlier about what's next, and you did give an answer. But I
Kind of. I didn't really give an answer. I avoided the question, if we're being brutally honest.
I know. Everyone does. I think Leslie was the same. Andrew Powell was the same. Samantha Hillis was the same. The list goes on. But I really, the question I wanted to ask you was, you're really quite philosophical. You are helpful. You're doing a lot to assist the profession. And so I wondered if you've got a book in you somewhere that might come out and that might be helpful to others. Have you got any plans to write a book, either fictional or non-fictional?
The answer is yes, but I won't disclose when. But the answer is yes. So that's what I'll give you. The answer is yes. There is something coming, and closer to the time, I'll be more vocal about it. And in fact, I may come back on the podcast and talk about it in more detail.
Yes, I'd love to have you. And we have a very successful Women in the Law UK book club, in which we invite the author. So the Secret Barrister is coming this evening to talk about his second or her second book, Fake Law. I don't want to give anything away or suggest I know the identity. So you need to come back. We always invite the author having read it. So I think you'll come back on there as well. Tunde, it's been wonderful talking to you and interviewing you. You're an inspiration to the profession and to your family and friends and to all of us to keep going. Thank you very much for talking law with me, Sally Penni.
Thank you for having me.
A big thank you to Dr. Tunde Okewale. We really look forward to hearing more about Tunde's book, and of course, I would love to have him back on Talking Law. Don't forget, Women in the Law UK has a really successful book club and 2 fantastic books available too, Talking Law Volume 1 and Talking Law Volume 2, both for charity. You can find all the details online at Women in the Law UK or on Amazon. Thank you so much for listening to Talking Law with me, Sally Penni. You can find me on Twitter at SallyPenny1. We'd really appreciate it if you left us a rating or a review. Thank you in advance. Thank you to Wesleyan Financial Services for supporting this episode, and thanks also to Sam Walker and our production team at What Goes On Media. See you next time.